Today I hope to answer the question, what is the root cause of chronic disease? There's some fascinating studies out there and a whole area of research which is looking at the underlying causes of some of these chronic lifestyle disease and how changing our lifestyle has impacted these. Much of this research is suggesting that it's what's in our gut that is making the solutions will hold the solutions to many of our lifestyle diseases. What do you think of when you hear the word germs? Is it disease, Dettol, Glen 20, bacterial wipes? Well, today we're going to be looking at germs, and I hope you'll have a completely different appreciation of germs by the time I'm finished. Because what we're looking at is the impact of the microbiome on our whole body health. Now you can see the definitions there. Microbes are tiny germs. That's what we'll be talking about. Microbiota is a community of microbes, and that is what's in our gut. And the microbiome is the collective genes of the community of microbes. There's a growing number of studies suggesting that part of what determines the human body functions may not be our own genes, or not only our own genes, but the genes of the trillions of little microorganisms that reside inside our bodies. The influence of these genes may be greater than the genes we inherit from our parents. 99% of genetic information being microbial. And so that can have a huge impact on our health. So let's have a look at what's in our gut. 90% of all cells in the human body is in the gut. 10% of your body bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoa, worms, flukes, all of these coexist and interrelate in our gut. Different microbes live in different parts of the body, but the majority of the body's microbes live in the gut and the digestive system, and they eat what we eat. Our gut is a habitat, a body environment, or a garden if you like, where all these kinds of life forms exist. They are all planting, eating, controlling, cooperating, digesting food, communicating with each other and with the rest of the body. And they're all important. We're actually mostly bacteria. So what goes on in our gut that's so vitally important to our whole body? All the microbes, if you like, are part of a factory, all working together. Some scientists have called the gut our second brain because, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, about the brain-gut axis, but they've found the same microbes in the brain as they find in the gut, and that has huge implications for diseases that impact on the brain. Well, the function of microbes. They produce our vitamins, especially the B vitamins and K2, and they release them in the correct amounts into the bloodstream. They manage the minerals and the nutrients, breaking them down, and they produce neurochemicals like the dopamine and the serotonin, and they actually produce 95% of the body's serotonin. So if you think about the importance of those bacteria, they're crucially important when it comes to depression and things like that with the brain. There's also messenger microbes, which are associated with communicating between the gut and the brain. The production of energy, of course, in the mitochondria, hormone production in the intestines, and they also regulate inflammation and infections, which is the defense against the pathogens and all the nasty things that we seem to absorb into our body. They're training and modulating our immune system, and they're involved in the absorption and digestion and the metabolism. And they affect our metabolic rate, our weight gain or weight loss, And they can even swap genes and pieces of DNA amongst themselves, which is interesting. So they're constantly reading the environment and making changes to keep everything working efficiently. Something you may not be aware of is that the bacteria in your microbiome influences your health by strengthening your immune system, helps to reduce inflammation, it's impacting our genetic composition, and of course, as we said before, has an impact on our metabolism. Okay, let's have a look at the development and the composition of the intestinal microbes. And this is really interesting because you actually have them from birth. And children who are born by cesarean section actually lack quite a few of the microbes that a normal birth child would have. It's like our body is flooded with those microbes at birth, and cesarean section babies don't have that, and they can often have a lot more, they have higher rates of allergies, asthma, autoimmune problems than C-section babies, in the C-section babies. But it's interesting because if it's an emergency cesarean, it's not as bad. So it's like your body is actually preparing for that birth and already flooding that environment with those microbes before the baby's even born. Okay, we're now going to move on to what lifestyle factors positively influence the gut microbiome. And you may or may not be aware that recently in Brisbane we had a microbiome summit, and we had some quite a few speakers that came and spoke about all the different effects of the microbiome, and some of the research that I've put in these slides are from that. Dr. McCullough was one of the speakers. You may have heard of him, and his basic take was that there's 5 things that affect the gut microbiome. The diet, and he talked a lot about real food, sunshine, rather than just taking vitamin D tablets, which can actually be dangerous if you don't take vitamin K with them. Sleep, having the right amount of sleep, clean water and exercise. And these, he said, were the basic tenets of good health, and they affect our microbiome. Diversity affects the microbiome. The wider the array of microbes, the greater the variety of bacterial byproducts the body can use, and the less territory for disease-causing bacteria to occupy. Because the microbes eat what we eat, we have within our reach the power to influence the nature and the genetic material of our gut by changing the way we eat, and that's why diversity is so important. There's been quite a number of studies that have shown increased diversity from diets rich in fruit and vegetables. This was an interesting study. They compared children from Italy, and they weren't the children from Italy who were on the Mediterranean diet. They were actually on a Western diet. And they compared those with some African children who came from rural Africa. And they compared the actual microbiomes in the gut, and they actually found that in the European children there are a whole lot of them missing. Like their diet had actually wiped out some of those important gut bacteria, and in the African children they had a wider range of microbes. And I guess this really just highlights the importance of what we eat and how it affects us, and how it can affect with diseases and things like that. The European children didn't have a lot of the microorganisms that would actually help to protect them from infections and things like that. So a Mediterranean diet, of course, is or any traditional plant-based diet produces a greater diversity of intestinal bacteria, and a higher proportion of beneficial bacteria than those produced in the typical Western diet. Increased consumption of fruit and vegetables resulted in, from higher fibre diets, resulted in bacterial gene richness. Diets higher in fruit and vegetables also equaled lower levels of frailty in the elderly and increased bacterial richness. So it has implications, especially for nursing homes and things like that. There are certain types of bacteria that thrive on fruit and vegetables, and indigestible carbohydrates in the diet are actually fermented by the intestinal microbiota to produce short-chain fatty acids, which help to regulate the immune function and the intestinal hormone production and lipogenesis. They did a study of overweight and obese people, and those who had the higher gene richness had a greater abundance of the microbes. And individuals with a higher baseline displayed greater improvement in insulin sensitivity markers and other clinical parameters after their calorie-restricted diet. So individuals from with obesity and type 2 diabetes differ from lean and healthy individuals in their abundance of certain gut microbial species. High fibre, low-fat diets have been found to have a protective effect against cancer, especially carbohydrates and fibre in the form of resistant starch. Short-chain fatty acids help regulate the immune function and control inflammation. Mediterranean diets provide lots of fibre and inflammation-fighting gut bacteria. Your fruits, your green leafy vegetables, your olive oils, your tomatoes, your fish. And fibre is really good for gut bacteria because it helps to ferment those complex carbohydrates. All fruit and vegetables are microbiome-friendly food. So now let's have a look at what factors negatively influence the gut microbiome. And a lot of this is tied up with our Western development because we have a lot of the things now that actually are destroying the microbes in the gut. Everything from antibiotics, anti-inflammatory drugs, antibacterial agents, you know, people who are squeaky clean and don't allow germs are actually damaging their own guts in some ways. So I'm not saying don't wash your hands and don't be hygienic, but I think we have to be careful with some of the toxins and environmental things that we use, cleaners and stuff like that. Diet is a big one. Of course, you're packaged in processed foods and all the additives. Diets rich in meats and high animal fats lack fibre. We talked about birth by caesarean section. Bottle feeding is another big one. They found that while your microbiome actually begins in the birthing process and in utero, they've also found now that bottle feeding and things like that affect very much your gut bacteria and the richness of the genetic material in your gut. And this has big implications for children. Children living in Western civilizations also often go through many antibiotic courses. They say that by the time a child's 18, the average child will have had between 10 and 20 courses of antibiotics. And then we wonder why they don't have that gut bacterial for fighting infections and things like that. Is your gut garden a mess? This is my garden just recently. It was a mess. As you can see, it's overgrown. Your microbiome is very much like a garden. You eat the wrong foods and your gut microbe gets out of control. The bad bacteria take over. Now, you've probably seen this ad on TV. balancing your microbes. It's all about Inner Health Plus. Now, I'm not suggesting you run out and buy Inner Health Plus, because I believe that your food has what you require. But what often happens is sometimes very benign microbes, if they're given the wrong foods, it affects them and they grow out of control. Obviously, having the right foods is going to have a far more synergistic effect than what taking a vitamin or a pill is going to have. You can see that it's going to be a lot more helpful. Now let's have a look at Western diets and the intestinal microbiome. Researchers are constantly referring to our typical Western diets as being impoverished, having slightly lower gut, significantly lower gut diversity, and this lack of diversity lacks the protection our body needs to fight off some of the lifestyle diseases that are becoming more prevalent. A high-fat junk food diet causes the community of microbes in the gut to change, and you can see very obese mice here. They found that when mice were actually transplanted with the intestinal gut microbes from lean mice, they actually lost weight. So your microbes are having a huge impact on whether we put on weight and whether we have inflammation and metabolic syndrome and things like that. Low gut diversity of bacteria leads to inflammation, insulin resistance. All parts of the body are influenced, of course, by the microbiome. David McCullough actually links gut diseases like irritable bowel disease, colon cancer, inflammatory bowel diseases, and all of those. And he says inflammation appears to be the driving force behind a lot of these lifestyle diseases. There's a big connection between the brain and the gut because they're on the same axes. The diet has a huge influence on neurological health. What happens in the gut affects what happens in the brain. And they've actually found the same microbes in both areas of the body. And so they know they're very much linked. Kobliner shows convincing evidence that special diets may help children with autism. And Emily Deans, another researcher, cites some interesting research which links gluten and casein with autism. So you can see that a lot of these lifestyle diseases and things, a lot of the lifestyle factors and especially what we feed our microbes impacts negatively upon our gut microbiome and has a huge bearing. The increasing trend in lifestyle diseases is related directly to our change in diet and industrialisation over the recent years. And many of the fast foods, packaged foods, toxins we absorb, the medications that we typically use in our Western lifestyles are damaging our health, and in particular the good microbes in our gut. And in doing so, they are the root cause of many chronic diseases. Most people don't know that they have the power to heal themselves of lifestyle diseases, or at the very least lessen the impact of their diseases. We need to get the word out to them. What we eat today literally walks and talks tomorrow. And every time you eat or drink, you're either feeding disease or you're fighting it. Thank you.